So we're using it now, and it's part of our daily lives with Siri, and we can dictation models, and there's even like a translation is very robust nowadays. Back then it was in research, and we were studying it. And I remember going to a hospital, and I think that still happens, getting to a hospital and seeing a doctor taking notes by hand. And that's something that really made me click and say, there's something wrong about it. In the research, in technology, we're doing this amazing projects. We're studying hard. We're pushing the boundaries of research. And yet in society, in the markets, in the economy itself, it's not implemented.
Right.
There's a gap. There's something missing.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Data Scientist Show. Today, we have Laura Gabrysiak. She is a senior manager of data products and solutions at Visa. Previously, she's a data scientist building machine learning models and decision tools to enable Visa clients. She has a college degree in computational linguistics and has masters in design thinking, UX experience research, and information systems. Outside of work, she's building the local data science community in Miami and a co-founder of Our Ladies. Today, we'll talk about his career journey from UX research to data science and machine learning, and her transition from IC to management. And we also talk a little bit about how to use machine learning to reinvent customer engagement. If you have been following the show, subscribe to the channel and give me a 5-star review. Welcome to the Data Scientist Show, Laura.
Thank you. Welcome to Miami.
Thanks. Yeah, we're recording this at Miami Beach. So how did you get into data science?
Well, that's a very long story. And first of all, thank you for inviting me. I've been following your show. It's a great show. And it's been a pleasure to meet you. So here we are. And I'm more than happy to share my story. So I got into data science when it wasn't even a data science. Data science is a topic that we keep hearing about it. It's like everywhere. Some people don't even know what it means. But a couple years ago, right, like 5-10 years ago, there wasn't any data science. I migrated to Germany. I'm half German, half Cuban. I grew up in Cuba, and when I went for my studies in Germany, I got lucky enough to hear about computational linguistics. Now, computational linguistics was a very niche program, undergrad, combining computer science and linguistics, plain linguistics, Chomsky linguistics. It was a great experience. I ended up specializing my thesis in text mining. And then I went abroad to Italy in Trento, where they were very heavy into machine learning. I started sneaking into the master's courses, and I was blown away by all the models and everything that you could do in a more machine learning, more classical data science field. So that guided me, and that was almost the start of my journey to combine and to understand human behavior through either quantitative or qualitative research methods. After that, I started working with the Artificial Intelligence Research Center in Berlin, the DFKI, working with the Language Technology Department as a user researcher. So what we would do was focusing and using what I learned in my undergrad, either text data to build ontologies and really start explaining relationships, semantic relationships between people, but also events to model an ecosystem. So we were trying to model and trying to describe the whole research community. Funny enough, we had a lot of grants from the European Union. We had a project called Meta, where we were trying to collect resources and try to map the internet when it came to languages, and to identify sources and part of the internet that were on the danger of extinction, just because a lot of native languages are dying day by day. And well, it was very interesting back then. For sure. And that's how I got to my master's. So after working with the DFKI, I heard that the University of Potsdam was offering the second cohort of the design thinking school based in Stanford. They were doing the second cohort. And I decided to try it out to see what it was. I remember having one experience of my life. What I was doing, I was studying computational linguistics, right? I was seeing all the applications that we have back then, language models, and I'm talking about 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So we're using it now, and it's part of our daily lives with Siri, and we can dictation models, and there's even like a translation is very robust nowadays.
Yeah.
Back then it was in research, and we were studying it. And I remember going to a hospital, and I think that still happens, getting to a hospital and seeing a doctor taking notes by hand.
Yeah.
And that's something that really made me click and say, there's something wrong about it. In the research, in technology, we're doing this amazing projects. We're studying hard. We're pushing the boundaries of research. And yet in society, in the markets, in the economy itself, it's not implemented.
Right.
There's a gap. There's something missing. And that was the beginning of a whole paradigm shift, I think, in my perception, what it is to be a data scientist. And going through design thinking was learning how it is to develop a technology user-centric. What is it about understanding the pain point, the underlying pain point that you're trying to solve?
Yeah.
Before that, I was more into, all right, computer science, that's cool, optimizing it, running the programs. We're writing, oh my God, we were doing grammatics that we were defining, doing language models. That was very interesting itself. I realized that I wanted to solve problems.
Yeah.
And for that, I needed to understand the problems. Not only that, the design thinking school really provided a more practical way of learning. Very American. In Europe, it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
And it was a lot with project partners and really going through real life projects, like solving optimization problems from a hospital to social problems with very, very real life problems that have nothing to do, you might think, with data science or computational linguistics, yet you can solve it with data, or you can solve it with understanding the users and understanding the processes and defining things. And a very important, we will work with the interdisciplinary team. And of course, we will follow all the agile principles that we now implement in the industry.
Yeah.
So that was very interesting. I ended up being working with SAP. It's a German company, ERP systems, very big. They were big. They have their headquarters in Foster City, in Palo Alto, as many other companies. And I ended up starting an internship and going there, working almost with pre-sales. Kind of, they were having, they had like innovation center. And they had what it's called the Fiori migration. So a lot of their technology was very robust, very stable since many years. However, it was not user-friendly at all.
Yeah.
So what they were doing is trying to understand how can we improve all this technology so that it's usable, we can save money with trainings, it's more adoptable. And they ended up having the Fiori apps where you can have like a layer over it and really discover how you make it user-friendly. I started working with lab data, with survey data. We did opinion mining. That was very interesting as well. I worked with designers together.
Yeah.
I learned how it is to try to explain technical definitions and technical ideas to non-technical people.
Yeah.
And the power behind that, how it is to get feedback, how it is to work even with a model with a prototype. You don't have to go, and I think something that we're going to be talking how you go from in college especially, right, with perfect data, small data sets, and then you're thrown out there to the real life with this massive, highly with no quality data sets that you have to make sense out of it. So that was very interesting. Working with SAP and working with all, I mean, it was a very enriching, amazing experience. And producing products that people use made me think, all right, I need to go back and really wrap it up with another master's back to Germany. And that's what I went, more the classical data science. I was still trying to figure it out. And again, back then, there weren't any data science programs or paths that you could follow. It was computer science, and then we have statistics because it was also linguistics and text mining. So I got already very lucky, and it was already the track. Learning the user-centric perspective helped me a lot and still helps me. And then I really needed something that would round that up. How is it? It was a program within the economics faculty and the computer science faculty. So it was a mixture between continuation, more information systems based, and then from the economics part of it, it was econometrics, very statistics heavy, lots of data. I learned about R, which also shaped kind of my future. And again, it was working with cross-disciplinary people. We were it's called Wirtschaftsinformatik. Witchcraftsinformatik? No, it's the mixture. It's business informatics, computer science. But you also had people working, studying business and finance and operation research. So it was very cross-functional, cross-disciplinary. We ended up organizing also a summer school with the Havana University. Yes, that was great. Also teaching, development economics, operation research, and we also had like entrepreneurship and like user-centric development. That was very interesting to see how a culture has an impact on the dynamics of a project, which is also enriching for your career. So
Wow, that's such an amazing career journey. And I think it's very impressive you realized the importance of user research pretty early, because it's something later on I realized whether you're creating a dashboard or building a machine learning model, you're creating a product. And then if you don't know who is the end user, how are you going to use it? Even if your accuracy is 100%, maybe you're not solving the right problem. So kudos to that. And now I want to double click on some projects you mentioned throughout your journey. Could you share more? For example, you talked about mapping the internet to the language. Could you tell us a little more about what approach and what type of data you were collecting? How did you solve it?
Absolutely. So we were working with the language department of the FKI, and that was, there were two grants. One was the Meta platform. One was called LT World. LT World was creating the first ontology where we record all resources, conferences, papers, projects, grants around, it was almost like a recursion around computational linguistics. And for that, it's a classical text mining project. I was crawling all these different websites and universities, and it helped me learn a lot. It helped me to discover a lot of conferences that were happening and summer schools and grants. But there's a lack of collaboration between a lot of research centers, and even in Europe, we have the European Union, you have grants, and we're trying to centralize it and channel it and really make, provide a platform for important projects so that they will get the grant they need and the support they need. In terms of the technicality, it was just crawling it and then coming up with the classification with the labels. That was very interesting for me to learn, because very often we're trying to fit the classification with features, but you have to come up with the features.
Right.
So that was very interesting part, how not everything is about the algorithm itself. You do have to have that critical thinking and get everyone together, and having someone who's more business focused, in this case someone who will be working more with grants and papers and things, and having that support. The Meta project was a grant to support resources in the internet that will keep alive all these minority languages that are not supported, let's say, in the internet or in the media itself. There's just like animals are dying, becoming extinct, cultures and languages are becoming extinct. And again, that was a couple of years ago. I know that, for example, for Navajo is not even in such danger. There's a lot of projects right now to put it more out there, to teach the newer generations, the younger generations, to create media, to create content. And I think social media, the explosion of social media, has provided also a platform that can be used. But again, that was like years and years ago. It was very interesting though, because when you work with unstructured data, with language itself, language is people, it's behavior. It's one-on-one behavior, is how people feel. You can extract a lot of information. I know that a lot of people are probably familiar with sentiment analysis, even though sentiment analysis is very tricky. Language is very tricky, but at the same time, it opens almost a dimension to try to understand and get a lot of different levels of information behind that, messages and data sets.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I think exactly in linguistic studies, you don't just, like you said, put the data in the model. You have to understand the context, right? The same sentence, maybe you change a few words, it can sound sarcastic, or in other words, it can just sound, funny, or things like that. So I think that definitely you have to use some background of design thinking, user research.
We could be talking weeks about it. Don't tempt me. But I was just reading there's a great newsletter in LinkedIn. They're now also data scientists that also with podcasts, they're creating like newsletters, and it helps to channel what articles out there are important, kind of what we were doing back then. And I think Google, of course, it was Google came out with the language model that it's able to understand the joke and explain why. And that was, for me, just it blew up my mind, because humor and sarcasm, very close, are very hard to model and to understand and replicate. It requires a lot of what we call the common ground in semantics, and the mutual knowledge to understand a joke. So I was like, wow, I really want to understand that better and learn, read the article. But it's incredible.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And could you share some interesting project you did as a UX researcher?
As a UX researcher, high level was interesting for me, without getting too much detail. That I worked in very different settings. As I mentioned before, I worked in a lab where we would have like control groups, and it was more almost like survey and experiment design. Setting up a control group, setting up a questionnaire, which is very complicated if you want to do it right, and not have a biased data set afterwards. And then track that information and make something out of that experiment. That was very interesting to have like firsthand lab experience. I worked what we called immersion, or setting up immersion immersive experiences, where the user researcher would go and do like interviews or get like more qualitative data from personas.
Yeah.
And I worked in, doing like opinion mining, working a lot with social media, trying to extract topics from those opinions and trying to mix and combine the quantitative approach of collecting data from people on social media and so on, and trying to crystallize it to the point where we had a persona that was reflected in the data set. What happens very often, and that's something that I'm still navigating, right? And it's a journey. Our whole career is a journey, and that's the beauty of it. I've seen both sides, the qualitative side, the quantitative side, where we're just like, oh, let's get all this data, and we're sometimes, unfortunately, more focused on the algorithm and the model itself, when the data is so important as well, right? Sometimes they're disconnected, they don't work together. And what it ends up happening is you have a marketing team or a research team that comes up with a persona they think it's relevant, it's legitimate, but they don't know if that is representative of your data set. You don't know how your distributions are.
No.
So finding a hybrid way, I know that there's a reason why they're disconnected, but I was trying to tap that gap and trying to at least create that a little space, a pocket where we could say, hey, but remember there's a distribution of your population. You have to see if it's reflected or not. And then trying to combine quantitative and qualitative research methods to have almost, I've seen it now in some of the FANG companies, they have like this quantitative UX researcher, which is something new.
Yeah.
Again, that was a couple years ago when I was working as a UX researcher. What I saw the need, and I'm happy that they're tackling more into that. Just like we need a little bit more of UX research in data science.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm seeing the trend. I don't know if you have, but I have for sure.
Yeah. So in my early years, well, it's like 4 or 5 years ago in Amazon, I have worked with UX researchers to understand A/B testing, why people want to click this and not click that. And I do observe more UX researchers are learning data science tools, like starting from like SQL, maybe a little bit of Python, or at least understand experimental design. And but I think for data scientists, I see some are more interested in UX researchers, UX research, and kind of just have that mindset to understand their users, but a lot of data scientists are still focusing on the algorithm. I think it's okay, just involve researchers, or if there's no researchers, put on the UX researcher hat yourself to talk to a few users. I think we don't really have to separate the two job families. I think always have the mindset of, both qualitative and quantitative kind of research to combine them. I think it's very important. Also, Jeff Bezos has a quote: if anecdotes contradicts to your, big data or the data analysis, I don't remember the exact phrasing. He said there probably something wrong with your data, but not the anecdote.
That is true. That is true. And I've seen it. We have something called the sanity check. And we're working and creating some part of, in my current team, I'm trying to push that more and more, where we have within our development process, we have some sanity checks, and it's more about, demo. And we've seen it in Apple as well, where they have a lot of demos in between, being more agile, but include that user-centric perspective. I'm developing something for someone who has an issue, or we want them to achieve something in case we're not covering or solving something, a pain point itself, that really sometimes prevents data science teams to going into rabbit holes.
Yeah.
Because it has happened where, especially if you have these huge data sets and you start looking, doing PCA and looking at correlations and variables and so on. And as a as a data scientist, I kept hearing how important it is, the impact of businesses.
Yeah.
And I'd say, no, you need to focus on have a lot of data and have a robust model, and that's it. And afterwards, yes, someone will present it and it has to be implemented somewhere as a feature. But it's not that important. And then through my own personal experience, I learned it the hard way.
Yeah.
But yes, there's great books. There's the massive math destruction. Was it Tools or Weapons of Math Destructions by Kathy Griffin, where she has a whole collection of models that backfired because the experimental design, if you think about it, the underlying experimental design failed to understand either the population, the end user that was using it. I think it was a great one on grading that end up incentivizing people to cheat better and more. We have language models that, or bots. I think it was like an app that was supposed to interact with little kids. And it had like a feedback loop on being retrained with the interaction with the end user. The end user ended up being also teenagers. So you can imagine what they were writing, interacting with that bot. And then in return, the bot starting learning very aggressive, very specific words, and it really backfired. So cases like that is always important to not to hide them, but to learn from them. What could happen if sometimes we don't take one time, you don't have to do it all the time, but it's at some point to zoom out and really have that overall perspective of the project. Who is my end user? Why are we doing that? What could happen? Different scenarios, aside of only the algorithm. Because yes, you might have an overfitting if you're solving it 100%, but you could have a very robust model, but yet it doesn't solve your ultimate problem or the ultimate feature that you want to work for.
Yeah, I like you use the word zoom out and zoom in. I think that's like kind of big data, analytic data science versus UX researchers. And I read an article called The Power of Small Data. So what it says is if you don't have the capacity to run a large experiment, you can do a small group of user research. So small data analysis is quickly to help you discover what doesn't work. If someone can load a website, just one person, it probably means 1,000 people can load the website. But in order to make sure whether something does work, whether people like something, whether you want to launch this feature, for this type of decision, you do want to have a large sample A/B testing to make sure the majority of people like this. So I thought it was very, very interesting. What do you think about that?
Well, it sounds like you're describing prototypes, and very often we think of prototypes in the sense of in design. We're designers as well. We're solving a problem. We're changing behaviors. We're solving problems. We use data to change that behavior, to make that decision, right?
Yeah.
Instead of theory, I don't know, but we're collecting that data and analyzing it. We started working, so that's what I came from, small data sets or smaller. I mean, working with social media, was tapping more into big data. And that's how I learned the burdens of it. Going to the industry and working with data science teams, we started working in a more agile way where we would even have samples of our data sets so that we wouldn't be dependent on cluster issues that happen sometimes. We will have our, small samples and then just run prototypes. You do it in models as well, right? To compare which model is the best one with the best performance. So I think I don't know if the whole industry has gotten to that level. I had very, very good experience with it, especially if there's an understanding. Sometimes if you even have a PM supporting you, it would be great. If you're monitoring it, I know then smaller teams can get very confusing if you have to deliver in a fast pace. you don't have the time to do that type of research, right? Or investigation or thoughtful developing. So how can you create a process when you can deliver in a fast pace, as sometimes it's required, but also keep that curiosity that really defines data scientists, where they're always, oh, what happens if, and this variable, and let me look into that and tap into this. Keep space for that curiosity and energy to keep developing, and work with prototypes, be it a data set. And then obviously, if you want to then launch a feature, you have to have a more robust sample to do your A/B testing, right? And have control groups and stuff. But I think the point, and I love that you brought it up, it's more about developing and being agile, even in data science, not only in design.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. And we will talk more about how you're transitioning into the data scientist, your project at Visa. But before that, for folks who are not familiar with the concept of user experience, user research, or design thinking, could you give us a mini crash course on what are the key elements data scientists?
I love that question. Thank you. So yes, because I also asked, what is that? What is data science? So design thinking, it's a combination of different fields and different techniques and theories from those different fields that were combined. Fields like psychology, design, even like the product development, business, of course. And it was put together as a theory by David Kelly. They founded the design thinking school in Stanford. And the idea was, as part of a design process, to bring together, following some principles of having cross-functional teams and following heuristics like fail often and early. I mean, we've heard it, but it was based on feedback, on prototypes, and then following a development process. And that development process came more from design, but we also see it in data science, where we've seen the process of, understand, gather data, EDA, then create your model, then test it and put it into production. If you put both models one next to the other, they're very similar.
Yeah.
It's define your problem, understand the problem. In the case of design thinking, you have a persona.
Yeah.
Whenever you understood and you collected the data, you come to a crystallizing moment where you have your POV, your point of view, you have your persona, the defined problem, and so on. And then you start a whole new cycle of developing solutions.
Yeah.
The design thinking is a user-centric design approach. It's used in a lot of hackathons, for example, if you want to have co-creations and come up with creative new ideas, because it really feeds of, one, the knowledge of cross-functional teams, two, creating like because you're following a path, a structure, or a process, you know what's coming, and you can really focus on the content and really your curiosity and really developing a solution or a product at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So a lot of good ideas and innovative ideas or services, products have been the result of design thinking.
Yeah. I totally agree with that, because with A/B testing, those large data set experiments, you can only test those products when it's already built. For example, Google, I think there was a time they have 500 shades of blue. We talked about with the episode of Patrick Minot. I highly recommend you to check it out. I think you can find optimal shades of blue, optimal solution for a small feature. But data A/B testing, big data analytic cannot help you build the next iPhone or next Tesla. You have to do this type of small data user research to understand specific what are people's pain points, how can you solve their problems. So I think user research and design thinking is a way to sometimes help you formulate like big ideas. That's very exciting. And so for data science project, when you finish a project, you have test data to set aside to help you validate your model. You can put it in production, get more data, and then you can close the loop through those new feedback you get. And my question is for design thinking and user research, how do you close that loop? How do you know whether the persona, the POV you generate is correct?
That's great. So in design thinking, there's a lot. So it was a lot of fun because the projects were very face to face. And you were talking about the prototype. An example is also the palm. When the palm was invented, the person who, I don't come up with the name now, he was carrying a piece of wood with him, symbolizing the palm, like the grandfather of our cell phones. And he will carry it with him, and he started tracking and seeing, is this behavior, does that make sense? Does it make sense to push for a whole, production line or research line into that? So it was a physical object. And just like that, within design thinking, sometimes you'll see people, if it's a product or something, come up with, let's say, a piece of paper or some prototype that is not ready. In the industry, if you see it with a model, it's tricky with dashboards and visualizations. Would even have encouraged the team to work more with analog prototypes where you really draw it on a piece of paper before spending, a week building your website or your JavaScript D3 dashboard, fancy dashboard. Just a piece of paper, and then feedback is very easy to get. And it's just talking to the right person, knowing also how to ask for feedback. There are books on how to ask for feedback. Even when we're testing, and when the user research comes into play, right? If I want to test how you interact with the model or a website, what am I looking for? It's not only just tracking any data, but what am I looking for? What am I expecting to get from you? What is the contradiction or the contrast from your behavior?
Yeah.
So,
thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
And how does design thinking or this past experience in user research helps you with your data science project in Visa?
No, absolutely. You were mentioning the one talk that I gave on customer behavior. One of my motivation going to Visa when I moved to Miami, which doesn't have the biggest or didn't have the biggest tech community. Now it's growing and it's flourishing. Yes. Was looking for companies with a lot of data, so I could work and experiment and really make use of larger data sets. And the payments industry, if you think about it, is also a great way to measure behavior.
Yeah. Because
you do have your financial fingerprint or your footprint through each of your transactions. And we have limitations in our data sets, but we do see all the transactions that people are doing, when they're doing it, where they're doing it. It gave a whole different dimension of data with geolocation. We don't have demographics, but the way around it, right? So it's a lot of data. So in design thinking, for the customer behavior, we set up, for example, if user journey. Not everyone is familiar with user journey. User journey is trying, as a developer, you're trying to put yourself in the steps or in the position of your end user, which you should be aware of, and then trying to think, what stages is he going through, right? And then in customer engagement, it's a larger problem to solve. So we have first the acquisition, right? Activation, you want to engagement, and then you want to avoid churn, classical churn. But just a step back helps you to segment a larger problem that you're trying to solve into several models that we had. There's also we had some interactions with the marketing team. We had a CLTV. So we had even, we kicked off like a mini hackathon to come up with the best CLTV model.
Yeah.
And CLTV is customer lifetime value.
Yeah.
It's widely used in marketing, and it's part of your client engagement. So understanding, again, zooming out, and understanding the different stages, your user journey, trying to map it and trying to develop models and solutions that are mapped and are aligned with the strategy of that larger problem that you're trying to solve helps a lot, right?
Yeah,
for sure. So that's one example of how to use it. Another example is, as I mentioned, if we're doing anything around data visualization, where we're trying to build that deliverable, build a dashboard, or build a visual portal, if it's just a website, working with prototypes, working more with feedback, working more agile, maybe bringing someone from another team, and not working only one team, just branch out, get feedback not only from the same team, which happens sometimes, and then you're overfitting your decision, because you know each other, you worked on that project to really get feedback. It's a whole mentality shift, and creating or breaking processes that are within the corporate setting sometimes.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned overfitting your decision because we hang out with the same people. And for example, when I work on like A/B testing, everybody I work with are research scientists and data scientists. I didn't learn about the word user journey until later I started to work with user researchers and product managers. Yeah. And what are some other, so what is the biggest challenge when you work with Visa customers' data, those kind of transaction data compared to previously, social media type of data?
Oof. So it's a whole different setting, working in a research department, even working with SAP. So I worked in the research department. I worked with designers in an innovation center that it's more like open. And now it's a more classical data science team, specifically consulting, which was also very enriching and helped me learn a lot. How, if you're a consultant, not only you have to understand the problem of your client, you have to speak the same language as your client, because you're trying to help somebody else's end user. It's like a different setting. With Visa is in the payments industry, right? In data science, obviously the privacy is very important. Very important to develop compliant models, treat IP. Be aware we're the gatekeepers of the data, obviously, putting the models into production, interacting with the data engineering team, having to develop in a fast-paced way, but still, as I mentioned, try to create those pockets to innovate and keep curious, keep that curiosity. Those are challenges that we are facing, right? The privacy or the ethical AI movement that it's coming in, I think it's very relevant. I'm always thinking, how can we implement it? It is important. There's a great demo from Google's data visualization, I think it's People Research group. And they brought it's a paper on credit liquidity. It's very basic, but then their thesis was if you want to be ethical, is it impacting your revenue, right? Which is you cannot optimize. You optimize into a point. So they have a whole demo. You can interact. It's greatly done. You should go and check it out. Where you could do simulations of the revenue you want to create, how much you want to optimize that model. So going back to your question is how I mean, in Visa's case, we're not a bank, but any data science team should be aware of that, of the selection bias, of the confirmation bias as well that we have. And unfortunately, it's up to us also to solve it. Yeah. To have the mindset and bring everybody else. So that's one of the biggest challenges. But with challenges, there's a lot of opportunities. I started working more with geospatial data, not so much. Unfortunately, that's transactional data, but geospatial, the geospatial field, it's very, very interesting. I miss working with more language data. Yeah. I hope that I might be able at some point to bring it back in some sort of a project. But geospatial data is very interesting. Data quality is a big issue still. Yeah. I was working with Latin America, and it depends who's providing data, the processors. Sometimes, especially when it comes to geolocation, the data is not standardized, and it's up to us to, clean out that data. Yeah. So it's those are challenges that we're all facing. And then also having the time to keep zooming out. I always say zoom out and have that sanity check, because that's what helps us to really not forget the big picture, not to go in a rabbit hole in some analysis. And you were mentioning something before that I thought was very interesting, how we all wear different hats at points. Yeah. Even in the data, be it if you're an engineer, data engineer, data scientist, data visualization, there are times where you're developing. There are times where you have to make a decision. There's times where you have to present or collect requirements. You're more the PM. There are times when you're a user researcher. Yeah. So those are also challenges, because I'm working now in a much larger setting with more teams. I have now my own team. How can I keep wearing those different hats? Yeah. How can I become better communicating and reminding people, or trying to communicate my learnings from my journey? It was not a linear journey. It was with many turns. Yeah. But again, if you zoom out, I'm very grateful for the journey that I went through, because I started gathering different tools for my tool set as a data scientist. And each of us has a very different tool set. Some are more, again, on the machine learning and really like optimizing your feature selection, and others are more that we have different tool sets that we need to combine in a team to really be successful, if you ask me. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And so now, from your experience as user researcher to data scientist and consulting, so what is the major kind of mindset shift from a research role to data science? What is something you only learned when you worked in industry? That's a very good question. What do I learn now? I have learned to appreciate development process. To stay clear on the path, to stay clear what are the limitations of my data set, to identify early on what might be limitations that we have to take into consideration. Yeah. How to be agile, how to communicate better with all the teammates, right? To stay on track. Yeah. I've learned to be very project focused, more in the tactical, unfortunately, more in the tactical, but really we have to deliver. How can we make sure that we deliver what we want to do? Right. Sometimes when you work in research, you have a more flexible work set or work mentality where you really have more space to investigate and do research. When you're in consulting, it's very, or even in more in the corporate area, it's about how can we do a good job and innovate, but how can we deliver on time, and how can we build ecosystems within our area. Sometimes you might have a data science research team that is different than a product team or a consulting team.
Yeah.
So I've had the luck to not be in a research perhaps within the industry, but in the research institute, but I worked in research, working in consulting, how important it is to communicate with your clients.
Yeah.
And to communication, sometimes it takes a lot of time, and sometimes we didn't have a PMO, for example, or someone would support us. So we ended up wearing that hat. And now in product, which is, I'm coming closer to the user research part, it's very user-centric,
okay. Nice.
user-centric approach.
Yeah.
Always don't forget what you're developing for.
Yeah.
As a consulting, you're more building a relationship and selling that amazing service or product that you created. When you're in products, you're very optimized as of your KPIs, or your delivery and delivery times and the features, developing new features. So that's a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. We have some similar experience when we worked in industry. I also have worked on a team that focused more on research. The development cycle is longer. The tolerate for failure is longer. I think the goal, sometimes you do a few innovative projects and we're not attached to the end goals. So the benefit of that, you get to try different methods. And the disadvantage of sometimes as data scientists, we feel frustrated when projects fail. So those teams had more tolerance for failure, but also you need to find fulfillment in maybe finish a pipeline, code some templates you can use in the future instead of you don't really see your research being used by a customer. However, when I worked in a consulting experiment, it's very exciting to see your product get launched very quickly. You draw real impact for customers. They make more money, save more time, but sometimes you don't really have the time to go deeper on the research. And sometimes I don't know whether something worked, but kind of on a high level, and then the project's over. And also it has a less tolerance for failure, right? You're working with a customer, they're kind of paying you, your company, and you want to make sure it works. And like you mentioned, in those teams, I had more meetings, more time in communication. I think one, not like frustration, but one thing I observe is sometimes you start working on the solution for a customer because you want things to move very fast, but then you realize, it's kind of a dead end. The solution doesn't work. And then you have to pivot to another solution, maybe collect different type of data. So that's something we constantly need to deal with. So for your...
But let me ask you, what is the approach? Because that's
your approach. Okay.
So that's the power.
Yeah. Okay. I can share it after you share.
Okay. You go first. No, you go first. So that's the power of being agile. I think I love the algorithms. I love an elegant code. It's very nice. However, don't forget that you're doing everything with the data. So you really, sometimes I know that other people build a project for us, for the data science team, and the data science teams are included in a much later stage. It's key. It's important to really do a deeper analysis on the data. Like having checkpoints. Is it populated? Is it qualitative correct, the data? Can we replicate the insights? Just basic, sometimes frag list, but those sanity checks at the beginning are very, very, very important. Just because if you're already in that point where it's a dead end, that is a failure. Why? Because we lost a lot of time.
Yeah.
So we lost already a lot of time. That's the opportunity cost as well. So if you think about and I'm wearing my PM hat.
Yeah.
If you're thinking of the salary of a data scientist and a team, and they're putting resources and time into that, on the other side, the client has also, and that's something interesting that I also learned in consulting, you're dealing with other technical teams.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of logistics. My advice is always make sure that you have hands-on, and every team has a different way of treating things. Make sure that you have hands-on and you build that rapport with the other technical team. If you're getting their data, or we're having data from either an internal team or an external team, make those checks, create that collaboration, create the platform for communication, especially at the beginning, so that you're one-to-one. We even had like some templates, just like a Python code that we developed, and then you would just run it in, and it will give you like a mini report. And we had SLA. So it's all about the process that you build within your organization, how you treat that development process, and how consistent it is, how much you use it. If you're consistent, then you will get to a point where it's not even your responsibility. You push it into the client. If you're in consulting, right? You have to give me something that I can work with. So that's that's pretty much. Unfortunately, I cannot give you a better answer.
No, that's a great answer. Yeah.
That sometimes we think everything is complicated because it sounds fancy, and you can solve it with very simple things.
Yeah. No, I think that's very important. The more complex situation sometimes requires simple solutions. To have this framework, this mindset you go to stick to the process. Of course, sometimes you get feedback from the project. You might want to also change your process a little bit, but I think the core principle is the same, right? Like always think about what the problem you're trying to solve, being agile. And I can share a little bit about my experience. I think for us, the team I was at were building a lot of machine learning solutions. So sometimes when you started to run a prototype, the minimal viable product, and then you find it doesn't work, like you mentioned, you have the opportunity cost, you're already like halfway through the project. So it's kind of different from a classical data science project. You can quickly do POC. So that's the challenge we have. So sometimes it's already too late to discover, something that doesn't work. So how we do this is usually in the beginning when we talk with the customer, we'll get a very high level goal. And to achieve that goal, we will have maybe not just one problem we solve for them. Maybe we have 2 or 3, kind of diversify the risk of a failure of one project.
That's good.
Yeah, and then we work in teams. So it's a 2-3 person team, and maybe 2 person working on a solution that we think have higher chance of success, and then other 1 person maybe just doing something like innovative, trying something new, kind of work on something kind of maybe a long shot, but if this person can figure it out, it really solve the problem. The other person work on maybe a more kind of foundational, kind of safe type of solution for the project. And then we treat this, sometimes we treat this entire project like if you think about investment portfolio, right? You have the stock, the SP 500, that's gonna progress stably. I mean, not these days that we're recording, but generally more stable. It will work. You have the expectation, and other maybe you can think of it as venture capital. You bet on a solution, and they're probably gonna fail, but if it's success, it will give you 100x return. So I think sometimes to think of data science projects as a portfolio help you manage those failures and expectations.
I love that insight. That is so something similar I learned from the design thinking area. Where whenever you are ideating, and again, that's what I'm saying. They're very, very, they're not too far away from each other, the two fields. And I know we're talking at a very high level, but whenever you're choosing an idea or a project to pursue, we had this process where you say, this is the low-hanging fruit, which is easy to be implemented. It doesn't require that many resources. It's stable, doesn't have that much risk. If we start thinking in terms of risk, right? Then you had the dark horse. The hard horse was the crazy idea, the fun idea that requires a lot of resources, has a lot of risk, but it also has like if it succeeds, it could mean a breakthrough flagship, solution. So that's very interesting that you guys see it as even as a portfolio. When I referred before to the data, is I encountered several times with our clients came to the place, we got some external data sets, large data sets, and they did not have the insight of that data set. They knew more or less, but they didn't have, for some reason, I don't know what still happens. People think that because it's data science, everything is clean and everything is very optimized. It's the opposite. It's very sometimes organic. Sometimes data is very messy. It's not properly labeled or it's not standardized. It's the result of merging different data sources and, again, very organic. So the first step was to really open up that data set and not and tell them like, hey, you think that, I don't know, you want to optimize the use of debit, or you want to increase a revolving behavior, but there's no revolving behavior, things like that, where the underlying assumption was not met. That needed to be done at the very early stage before you go into a whole model, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I think that was very, very helpful for us. And I love that idea of the portfolio. And I think it will be interesting to have the mental exercise and think how it would be. Bring it back and having like a menu. Hey, do you want to have the fun solution, or do you want to have the resource? It's again PM hat. PM hat. So yeah, thanks for sharing that.
And well, we don't need to get into too much detail in your project, the Visa. I'm curious if you could share what are some common method you use to improve customer engagement. For example, like churn analysis. Are there certain type of models you use very common, or for data scientists who want to get into this area, what should they study?
So those are different questions. So customer engagement, the first step is understanding it. We work with CLTV. For churn, it's just like it's very classical data science,
like survival
analysis. Yeah. We did also what do you call that? CLTV, survival analysis, just an index to predict your likelihood of churning or not. And then in activation, it was around that.
Yeah.
And a lot of the work that we did was actually merging and complementing data sets and building up dashboards as well, so that the client could navigate through their data and actually understand it.
Yeah. So when we think about dashboarding, a lot of people just, you just put a lot of graphs out there. So how do you use dashboard to really help people make decisions or change behaviors? How do you make the dashboard actionable? So
for data visualization, it's not about just putting any graph. It's a whole different field almost. It requires a lot of understanding on the data, and then pretty much using user research. It's trying to find out what are the underlying questions that you want to answer, and then using design, using UI, information architecture, drafting. I call it even a visual platform that it's almost a decision platform, a decision tool that will help you change your behavior. What is the information you need to change your behavior? So it's not putting all the information in there, recognizing what level of information you need, if it's more high level or if it's more granular. Who is the person using that? So a dashboard is the product itself. And again, we can go into that. It depends what type of variables. It depends who's looking at it. What is it going to be done with it? Is it dynamic? Is it interactive? Or not? Is it static? But yeah, there's a trilogy of Tufte. Alberto Cairo's in UM here in Miami. He's great in data visualization. The University of Miami has even a whole track on data visualization as part of the data science program. Yes. And there's a lot of theories that go into play. There's a lot of testing as well. So you can even see it as a project and a product by itself.
So what are some common mistakes people make when they create data visualizations or dashboards?
Absolutely. Well, thank you for asking that. Data visualization is a whole field itself. I encountered it later in my career. As I mentioned before, I always worked with designers. I appreciate good design. So I was kind of prone to liking it and biased. And the University of Miami actually has a course, a track in the data science program. They're right here. I have to introduce them to you.
Yeah.
But Alberto Cairo is one of the professors, and you can check him out online. He has a lot of books of how charts lie, how visualize, just like how we can sometimes lie with numbers, we can lie with visualizations. And humans are, I think it's 98% visual beings.
Yeah.
So there's the impact of a visual, be it during the EDA, where we're looking at our data and trying to understand it, or an app, or a dashboard, has a huge impact on the final behavior of the person. So a common mistake that developers, designers do is to have a disconnect with the ultimate, what is the purpose, what is the pain point, and they just do a data dump, and they think that a dashboard is a report when it's not. So there's a development process for a project, data science project, there's a development process for a visualization project, where that includes the data, that includes understanding what are the insights, but also understanding what are the questions that we need to understand. There's something called the information architecture, similar to when you're building a website. Like, what's your structure of that argument that you're making? You're giving someone an argument with data, with visualizations, and you're trying to either support or provide some information to make an ultimate decision, be it I'm going to buy or not, I'm going to sell, or am I doing good or not, right? So keep that in mind. And there's a whole layer of techniques and theories that, of course, you can make mistakes, like coloring, using the wrong color, be like a heat map. There's a lot of, again, in geospatial realm, there's a lot of data visualization. Uber is doing a great job. But anyways, if you have a heat map, you use the wrong side of colors, then it might give you a bad idea. If you use red, it's bad.
Yeah.
Depending even, I was working with a data set that had a lot of outliers that we cannot exclude. And then if you put on a heat map, it's going to throw off the distributions of your color, because you have very high outliers that you cannot exclude, right? So you had it threw off the whole layer. So what we ended up doing was, for example, visualizing the quantiles instead of the whole points. Having like things like that. There are techniques and there's ways to be at individual level or on a higher level, the dashboard itself, how to structure it. Is there a structure with the information architecture? What type of chart do you use? Are you using a pie chart with like 90 categories? No. No, don't do that.
Yeah.
Is it clear? And have you tested it? A lot of visualization projects don't end up being tested. What's a feedback loop?
Yeah.
So there's a lot in there, but just start with, are you aware of the questions that you're trying to answer? What is the information that you need to answer those questions? Does it look clean? Can you understand it? Have you tested it?
Right.
And then always, I'm a big fan of implementing a feedback loop.
Yeah.
And you can even do like A/B testing after that, right? Like seeing like, do you have different versions? What are they clicking? What are they using? Is it having an effect in their decision, right?
Yeah.
And we know that, in Facebook or in Amazon, their teams, user research teams, really focus on that. As you said, the 50 Shades of Blue.
Yeah.
And dashboard design, it's a little bit like that. You're optimizing the use of that information. So
yeah, thanks for sharing that. So when you talk about information architecture, what are some other like elements there?
So information architecture is what the font, their techniques. It's almost like an ontology if you think about it in a structure.
Yeah.
What are your more granular pieces of information, and then how can you start clustering them? It's almost like a hierarchical clustering of concepts. Let's say you have all your charts. Some are related with demographic information. Some are related with payment information. So you start like clustering them, putting them together.
Yeah.
And ultimately, you're going to have blocks of information. Those are going to be end up your pages or your worksheets with all the charts that you have. Does every chart provides a different idea or a piece of information? Because very often you have, let's say, 3 visualizations, a line chart, scatter chart, or something. They all giving you the same information.
Yeah.
So again, it's all in context. It's a lot of try and fail as well, a lot on prototypes. So I always advise not to rush straight to development, but do that phase of user research, combining the data, which is interesting, and really keep that structure, that high level structure in mind.
Yeah. And I love that you mentioned start with what type of questions I try to answer when you design a dashboard, instead of thinking, oh, I have all the data, I'm just gonna put everything out there. The fancier, the better. Sometimes you might want to make your dashboard lean because you want people to focus on the most important question there instead of get distracted, right?
Well, that's a very good question. Sometimes you want them distracted.
Oh,
depends, right? We're talking more into the UI realm. I see data visualization if you see a Venn diagram between analytics or data and UI and user research. But it's kind of combining, again, different techniques. If you go into the UI studies, you look at Amazon. Amazon has a very busy UI. And then you have, let's say, an Airbnb or some of the latest like unicorns or bigger companies have relied very much on lean UI and user experience, right? So that the end user has a lot of information, and there's something called the information asymmetry, where if 2 people are, let's say, working on a contract or working on something, they will not have the same amount of information. There's always an asymmetry. If you're trying to negotiate a contract, you know what's your minimum or your minimum that you were going to, but your recruiter doesn't know that. And you don't know on the other side how much he's willing to offer. So there's an information asymmetry. When you order a taxi, before that, you didn't know how long it was going to take. And you didn't know where he was. So what the new companies are relying on is providing that information, is that minimizing that information asymmetry. You know who your driver is. You know when he's going to be there. So in fact, you're optimizing your decisions with that information. You know that you have 3 minutes and so on. You can optimize your time as well. That's an added value in businesses that they're providing.
And you also mentioned sometimes it's good to distract the user a little bit.
Try to distract a little bit. So if you think in terms of design, if you quantify, for example, a path, just like IKEA has been doing, you can optimize a straight path, and you can do the inverse of an optimization. You can look for the longest path within a store, and you can build that store so that the person has to go through as many parts of the store as possible, so that they buy the most. The more we're in engagement and an attention economy nowadays. So what you want to do is retain that person. So one thing is leveraging that information asymmetry is an added value, which is going to optimize your time. But you do want to engage that customer. You want to keep it into your platform. You want that customer spending as much time as possible in your product, in your platform, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Sometimes you by having a busier UI, it's a trick, right?
Yeah.
I'm not saying this is not the best way at all. It's just a matter of design.
Yeah.
You are increasing that time, and you can measure that. You can increasing that time of engagement, maximizing that engagement with the user.
Yeah.
Now that might be at the cost of user experience, but if the user does not either doesn't have a comparison or he's not aware of it, then it might be successful.
Oh yeah, that's very interesting. It also depends on the goal of the dashboard design. Do you want people to explore, spend more time on that, or you just want people to like make one decision to sign up or make a purchase?
Correct.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I never thought about it before. Sometimes a busy UI can also be good. Depends on the use case. And also, I think it reminds me of what you said before. When you optimize the time people spend, you from other perspective, you also want to be ethical when you implement AI. Like for example, on Instagram, I see now they have the button, oh, you're at the end of your feed. It basically reminds you don't have to do the endless scroll. They want you to spend a lot of time on their website, but they also want to maintain your kind of the information workload, because I think ethical AI on the other side, maybe for one user, one session, it doesn't maximize the time it spent, but I also know long-term effect, people get exhausted, they might delete the app completely. So the ethical AI from this perspective have this kind of element of human experience considered our long-term mental health. It can help the company to profit also in the long run.
Long-term,
yeah.
You'll be user-centric. If you care about your end user, they'll care about you in return.
Right, yeah. And you also mentioned the geospatial data. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, so in later projects, I worked at one point with a geospatial company with satellite data. And then in some recent projects, I started working with more and more geospatial data.
Yeah.
And we had let's say like a development index. And there's several papers out there. And, even in the R community, there are packages out there. There's geospandas as well. How can we track behavior information and also combine it, augment it at a geospatial dimension?
Yeah.
That opened a whole new realm, which I think is very interesting in data science, because yes, you have statistics and so on, but depending on the use case, be it survey data or geospatial or graphs, or, depending on all those different decisions, you're going to learn so much, and you have to be willing to, open up and learn about that. There are geospatial algorithms itself, operations, how to join, how to look. There are specific use cases, and you can look it up. There's GeoPandas. In our studio, there's also different packages that allows you to join, to come up with polygons. I don't know if you know that you have polygons, you have dot vectors, but it's being used more and more, right? If we look at Yelp or even Airbnb, you have a map. You have latitude, longitude, where your properties are. You come up with a polygon or cluster, where the clusters are. You can start defining lines and distances between them. There's also, I found there was a paper of it was on geospatial correlation, where you can come up with clusters, but you could also impact. We had one use case where we came out with clusters and an index, but it was in the underlying assumption that each city is independent from each other, which they're not. If you're a smaller city next to a larger city, you're going to have the residuals and a residual effect from the larger city.
Yeah.
So that was, again, that was a very interesting aspect, working with that. And I don't know who doesn't love maps. I love maps.
Yeah.
I love to see it. It's like we live on map. Visualizing it was very interesting, and visualizing or working with geospatial map got me into the field of seeing how geospatial data is structured. You have like a whole of levels. You have at level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Different countries have different structures. How you have a municipality or a city, or depending where you are. And once you go out of the United States or Canada, North America, data always is very interesting and very tricky, and it's hard to find data sets or create data sets, annotate the data sets.
Yeah.
So that was a whole experience working it with it, right? I remember even the names of the cities, which is a whole different, but using fuzzy match and looking at the papers and implementing it was really great. I did some research and I found some, and again, not being an expert in that field, but a fan and a user, I found, we use it a lot, right? Mapbox and R. We work with Tableau a lot. I found Kepler GL from Uber. So Uber is doing a lot of work around geospatial information, and they built this whole platform called Kepler GL. And it's very interesting. It's a whole field, how to visualize the data, if you're visualizing as dots, as points, as polygons, squares, hexagons.
Yeah.
I think anyways, it's very interesting. There's a whole new wave where they're visualizing data points as hexagons, because they have more points of contacts, and then you can try like paths better than with squares, for example.
Oh,
it's just a nerdy example, but I'm very passionate about it.
Yeah, can you tell us more about it?
You can find it in, I think, Esri has it as well. They have their libraries in Post, but if you have a square, you have only four sides of touch, right?
Right.
So you have vertical and horizontal. With the hexagon, you have more points of contact, so you can also track diagonal moves and paths. And they've been using that, I think it's to see, but again, I'm not a specialist, how to track points, right? If they're moving, you can have a smaller hexagon or a bigger hexagon, so you can work around that area to track movement.
Yeah. Oh, that's very exciting. I can see how you're passionate about it, similar to the project you work with, language related to like culture. And then you don't just fit in the data, you have to understand the context, and then you need to understand the people there, the language, how the structure of a country. Those are, a lot of stories there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always, I think it's what you were saying also with being ethical or being critical. I always like to take a closer look to the data and be like, why is it like this, right?
Yeah.
Like, why is it telling me this? Who's creating this data? Like, and I heard this, I think is in the book, Cathy Griffin, where it said humans are biased and we collect human data, therefore data is biased.
Yeah.
So that's kind of,
right.
There's always going to be some bias. We just have to understand that where it comes from.
Yeah. So people say AI is biased. I think AI algorithm only reflect or amplify the bias that humans have. It doesn't mean we don't, use AI for certain use cases. Just it means we need to have more diversity in the room, right? Who's collecting the data and who's making the decision? How are we going to make the decision to collect the data, to debias the data, and then put it into the model? And then I think we are always going to be, that's my belief, I think we're always going to have that kind of bias. And it's important to first recognize we have bias, we are biased. I think that's the first step to debias our decisions.
That's a very good point. And let me counteract with the question.
Yeah.
Because yes, one of the first steps of measuring bias, first of all, is being aware of it. So we need to track it and quantify it.
Yeah.
But then the question is, do you think, should we just normalize it and have some sort of regulation through models, through data?
Yeah.
By pruning it, or, selecting it, or, doing better samples? Or should we, because it's biased.
Yeah.
We keep that bias, and then it's a question. I mean, we need to keep it to track it and see how we do it.
Interesting.
So I'm always, because I keep hearing there's a lot of great projects around how to normalize bias and so on. And my question is always, why is that responsibility given the data scientists instead of, another person who would you track the data. We need some regulatory, someone that will come. We need to track it.
Right.
We cannot just sweep it under the carpet. That's how I see it. If we start normalizing and pruning data sets and not collecting that bias that exists, how are we going to treat that bias? I think is more important than if we're tracking it or not, or how we're training the algorithms and so on. I mean, that's interesting.
So basically you're saying if we are debiasing it, we don't know how much bias the society currently have, but we need to maybe just collect the data without debiasing it and let it pass a model to kind of, it's like an index of, you have a baseline, right? And then you compare that to maybe 5 years ago to see whether the society has improved. Maybe the same model has, for example, employment have less bias towards women when it comes to salary. That means we made some progress, for example.
And I mean, the demographics are constantly changing, but that's something that I love that you made that comment. I've seen it, that there's a lot of good, important work in debiasing, and especially in the algorithms. But at the point of the data collection, I've seen it that a lot of people, are resampling data sets, by selection. That was just one question that I had. I thought it would be interesting to have it in the conversation.
Yeah, no, that's great. I wonder, do you know whether there are some organizations that are doing this type of tracking?
Tracking
measure,
actively.
Yeah,
yes.
measured biases.
There's so my mentor, Gabrysiak-the, she's great. She has this organization called Inclusive AI, where they're taking that approach of making it inclusive and starting to track it. There are other organizations, I think it's Black AI as well, where they collect and track. There's Sophia Umoya. We had it as a guest to the Our Ladies, which she studies and researches algorithmic bias. So they're tracking. There's several organizations out there.
Cool. And now you become a senior manager. So what is the kind of the most important mindset shift from individual contributor to manager?
That's a great. So yes, part of the career has been now taking the new chapter of managing a team. Is a small team, but the mind shift changes that you can have an impact in someone's career. You can have it as well as an IC.
Yeah.
No doubt in that. You are having it, just because any interaction that you have, you can always uplift your boss, your colleagues, your whole department. When you have a team, I think it's very important, one, that it's clear what is the strategy, what are we doing here. I think it's very important always to support them in their career.
Yeah.
And feeding that curiosity, feeding that space for innovation, and aside of the deliverables, we spend a lot of time at work. It's very hard to have a 60 hour week and then go home and then have your own projects and give 100%. That's very, very hard. And for those who are doing it, kudos and hats off. But how can we within, and I appreciate, the leadership supporting that. How can we as managers or even ICs, how can we bring to the table? And I think there has been already a lot of change after COVID, how we're approaching work in different, and again, I'm not research. There are people that are actually investigating that and researching, but working from home, what has had an impact. I onboarded my team working from home. So that was also very interesting. But I think it's very important that connection, that rapport, it's built, that we spend a lot of time of work and we make the best out of that time that we spend with the team away from our families, right? Yeah. So how can I build a platform where my team is happy doing the work they do, what they're developing themselves, where they, being recognized, and not only them, right, but the whole community. How can they know what resources they have to do their job? I think that's something new that before that, you, as an IC, you're not aware of it. And then also part of that resources is always, are they getting mentorship? Do they need mentorship? Do they want mentorship? Do they want to grow in their careers or ladder moves, vertical moves? Hopefully they're content, but there's always a journey. As we were saying, look at my career, it has been a great journey, but it was always around of the things that I like to do and the people that I loved working with. For them, it's also a journey. So how can I help them, to get to the next point? I think that's a kind of great mindset from the perspective of management. I feel like maybe 10 years ago, 20 years ago, when people have a team, you want to fit a person in this role. But I think recent years, especially COVID, people start to value more about work life. Either people call it balance or integration. From a management perspective, want to see how can I empower this person in their career journey. And now when you look back in your own journey, and from a manager's perspective, what are something you wish you could have done more as a data scientist? Do you mean as a manager or before?
Before. So for example, now you're a manager, you can see how other people, do their project, you give them feedback. And then what are something you wish you know when you were a data scientist?
Oh, ask for feedback.
Yeah.
Feedback is so important. Not only on your model, not only on your dashboard, but also within the team. Yeah. Communicating and being aware of that development process. There are deliverables that have to be done on time. But definitely get more feedback. And by asking for feedback, you're almost providing feedback to your colleagues because you're making them aware that they have to ask for feedback.
Okay. Yeah, I like that.
I've seen a lot of technical teams. Sometimes asking for feedback or giving feedback is tricky. We get it. But maybe that's a cultural thing. And maybe if we're, we don't have to give feedback every day. Yeah. But here once and there, after you finish a project, after you work together with someone, just having that reflection, ask them, what can I do better? Yeah. What worked well, what didn't. So that helps a lot. Yeah. Helps a lot.
Yeah. And so sometimes when we have a meeting, we ask for feedback. I think the other person might have fear of upsetting you or make you feel bad. They might hold on to their actual feedback. So do you have any suggestions what type of questions or format you can get the most unbiased constructive feedback?
That is a very good question. You put you make it anonymous. So either you build a rapport and it's just about, and you're entering in a more like mentee mentorship relationship where it's like, let's sit down and we work together, and can you give me some, some directions, especially if something didn't work out well.
Yeah.
Just be vulnerable, because it is vulnerable.
Yeah.
Even before a project finished, get that real feedback. Not only there's different type of feedbacks, right? Like you don't want to ask for feedback once where you're with your final solution or with the final clients. But yes, just either put the survey there. I'm sure every company has that, where it's just anonymous. At Visa, we do have one. It's 360. You can send it around. I always incentivize people to give me feedback, because it's a gift. Yeah. Feedback is a gift. Yeah. Because you have nothing to lose. You can only grow from that. Yeah. So that's appreciate that time that your colleagues are taking, incentivize it, use it, and you'll be contributing to create a healthy feedback culture.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. And I also have this question, like, when people give you feedback, different people have different work style, communication style. So someone give you feedback that is a gift. It's from a place of wanting to improve, but some feedback might not be helpful for you, or sometimes feedback can be, really harsh. So from a recipient perspective, how do you receive feedback when, people are pointing you to different directions? How do you decide what feedback to take, what feedback to ignore?
I can ask you the same. But again, first of all, it's a gift because you didn't have that information before, and now people took actually their time and they made some thoughts, and they gave you this piece of information.
Right.
What you do with that, right? That's a more like a decision from your side. You could ask yourself, why are you getting that? And really start reflecting on yourself. Yeah. You can decide sometimes if you want to share that information with other people. If you have a mentor and see, I can understand that it is overwhelming sometimes. Right. Especially if you're first time or if people are giving feedback, and that might be all constructive, because not everyone knows how to give constructive. And sometimes you might face criticism, and that's part of it. And I think, especially in our careers, we don't talk enough what happens if, right? You get like a VIP, or you get like bad feedback, or it's not a sexy topic, but I think it's part of the process of that journey, and really what to do, right? If there's a pattern, then that's easy. Work on that, or get some help. It's always good to get a different opinion. Like if you're overwhelmed with that information, you know where to go. At least you quantified something. It doesn't mean that it's true. It means that's how you are perceived. Yeah. That's the experience of the other people with you.
Yeah, I like that. It's how are people perceived. Yes. It might not be true. To separate that can help you kind of remove your ego out of the system. Yeah, I like that. So how I see, I like that you mentioned you can share that with other people. So I think there's one time I received some feedback. Someone doesn't agree with the processes, and I discussed with my manager. So from a manager's perspective, the manager knows me and the other person. So the manager makes some comments like, "Oh, this person, there's some value in it, but I think might be a little bit biased. So that might sound a little harsh, but the process you implemented, it works." So I think my manager said something really struck me. She said, there are 100 ways, 1,000 ways to solve a data science project. There's not right or wrong. So as long as you solved it, it's fine. I think this one is more of maybe you can see as a way of inspiration. Maybe next time you can consider that, but doesn't mean you're wrong. I think especially on the personal level, I think a lot of us maybe come from a family or culture somewhere when we feel that when someone tell us give a feedback, it's always, oh, something wrong with me. That question immediately pop up. I think sometimes it's good to remind ourselves, oh, it doesn't have to be something wrong with me. It's just, this differences. It helps us to reduce the anxiety when we receive those type of feedback.
I love that comment. I love how we started talking about data science, we end up with feedback.
Yeah.
But feedback is key. It's very important in our careers. Especially for development. And I love how he said anxiety. If we get feedback, we're getting anxiety. There's all this year reviews and mid-year reviews, and it's all about associated with performance because you're building your career. You want to be a high performant person, right?
Yeah.
But it shouldn't be. So how can you treat that anxiety?
Yeah.
If you're getting anxiety, then there's something, right, because it doesn't help to be that anxious. So if you make it a habit, a muscle of just getting here once in a while, not wait for that one time of the year.
Yeah.
Just check here and there. Provide also feedback. You might be contributing to improve that culture.
Yeah.
Because who knows? You never know what the other person is also going through. And I love that you said how from that experience, and I've had it as well, right? Where you have some criticism and they say like, okay, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Just, I'm going to be better next time. I'm going to adopt, or I'm going to make some changes and see how it's going to, I'm going to even experiment with that. Another style, like what I'm doing right now, it's not working 100%. So let me do some twist here and there.
Yeah.
And I think, again, one is being vulnerable, and it depends how you ask for feedback. If it's more like questionnaire, or if it's, sitting with someone or with a coffee for a more deep depth, mentorship relationship. That's one of the ways. And then what to do with it. It all contributes, I believe, to a more open workspace. Because again, I always keep in mind how much time I spent at work.
Yeah.
And we all do.
Right.
So it's almost like, it's not your family, but it's almost like your second family. It's cliche. It sounds like you're spending a lot of time with these people and also with your clients and so on. So it's always good to have that piece of information.
Yeah. And you also mentioned sometimes we get, in large company, we have this, performance improvement plan, PIP. Sometimes it can add a lot of stress to people because they're worried, oh, am I, getting fired? What does it mean for me? And I agree this topic hasn't been talked a lot about. And but sometimes I think about it. Do we have any advice to people getting PIP? Is there a way that's more effective for them to get out of it and get back on track?
That's a very good question. And here we are raising that topic. I didn't know what it was. And then I learned what it was, and I heard about it, and it's more common than you think. There's an app called Blind. Some of the audience might know it.
Teamblind.com.
Teamblind.com. It was very interesting.
Yeah.
Also because other people were talking about it. So a PIP, a performance improvement plan, is when you're not performing accordingly.
Yeah.
And for many people, it means it's almost like a tap on the shoulder before you're being disengaged. My advice will be, do not close up. Do not feel anxious or ashamed or whatever negative feelings are coming. That it's just another problem. Try to solve it. What's happening? Why did you get that PIP?
Yeah.
What was, try to disconnect the ego, disconnect the personal, your ego, your personal identity with the work, and why it happened. Try to solve it.
Yeah.
What was the expectation? What was done? Why wasn't it met? Can I do something? And take it from there. Take it a more objective, kind of solution-based approach. It is not necessarily the last step.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily the last step.
Right.
There are many factors influencing it. So my advice, my piece of advice would be that do not see it as a personal matter, and try to really define in terms of what was the expectation, why this happened, do I know what it happened, do I have some information from myself, or is it unexpected? Try to understand better why.
Yeah. Communicate more with your manager, work with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And you mentioned you had a mentor. So what is the most important lesson you learned from your mentor?
No, absolutely. I had many mentors and I hope I'll have more.
Yeah.
So a mentor, it's a great, so I'm always telling anyone, if you can go into a mentorship program or if you can ask someone to be your mentor, do it. If you've never done it, just try it out. To be a mentor doesn't mean that you're getting your Jedi Yoda, you're gonna get a Yoda. No,
Yeah.
it's just someone who's taking some time and some report and give you some feedback. That's it. Or sharing experiences. Someone might be your mentor without knowing it's your mentor.
Right.
It has happened to me. Like I'm listening very closely and I'm learning from that person. That's my mentor. There are some mentorship programs within every company, larger company. There are organizations providing mentorship. There are some meetups. Like it depends if you look for it with purpose, you'll probably find it. And it could be a mentee-mentor relationship where you learn from each other.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily has to be someone who's more senior to you. It could be someone who's in your same.
Yeah, it could be a peer.
Yeah, it could be a peer. And even sometimes if you're mentoring someone by just analyzing or seeing or sharing your experiences, he might ask you a question or he might ask you for help. And then, or you will find some of your own situations reflected in him. And therefore you get feedback. That has happened to me. I used the mentorship programs within my company. I found mentorships outside of the companies, females, males, sometimes more senior, sometimes the same peers, either grabbing a coffee on a regular basis and just asking for feedback or asking for, I'm in the situation, what would you do?
Yeah.
Kind of scenario. Enrolling in that program where we had like checks and then being mindful and really preparing a little bit. And again, that's even in such a official setup, it's when he said like, I'm feeling that I'm being mentored through my mentee because I'm asking him questions and I'm helping him grow or telling him how he's doing as a mentor.
Yeah.
Just think about it's a relationship, because as a mentor doesn't mean that that person knows everything. That person might be going through his first mentorship experience itself. And then through the Our Ladies, which is a community, it's for our stats, with focus on minority groups, especially women. So all organizers or speakers in that meetup are females. And right now, you should enroll.
Yeah. I started my career using R.
Oh, there you go. You should go back. And then, but we have a chapter here in Miami. The first chapter was in San Francisco. I don't know the exact number, but I think we're in the 200,000 now. And it ranges from researchers to anyone who does like more like corporate, classic data science. But that's, for example, a group of people, peers that are not necessarily in the payments industry or someone that I can go to and ask for advice.
Yeah.
I was just meeting with Gabriela de Queiroz, and anytime in San Francisco, I'm close to her, like let's grab a coffee because she's great. She's a manager, and I was asking her because it's my first time being a manager.
Yeah.
So I really want to do a good job, and I was trying to learn from other experiences and so on. Back to the point of even this show, right? Like if you love your job and you love what you're doing, very often it's up to you to develop your career journey, to look for help, to keep developing, keep learning, and get that feedback and mentorship that you need. Yeah. We all need it.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Is there any particular feedback or advice or inspiration you got from your mentor that shaped your career?
Many. So from Gabriela, she's very inspirational, and I loved how I could go to her and say, hey, I'm finding myself doing this more and more type of job. I miss doing the technical job. And your career, it's going to be flowy and it's a journey.
Yeah.
I'm embracing this new role. I'm learning new things. I'm juggling right now between management and technical work, but all that previous work that I've done, again, I see it as tools that I have in my tool set.
Yeah.
So the more you gather and the more you learn to balance it, in my case, it helps a lot.
Yeah.
It helps a lot, especially as if you're going to more senior role and you miss doing that technical work, right? What do you do?
Yeah.
So someone like, okay, you can do always like your own, projects. You can do collaborations. It's all in my hands. You have to know what you want to do, but you also have to experiment the different teams they are, the different types of work, to really know what direction ultimately you want to go. So that was, she guided me there. And I think that just by sharing your experience, you know how you feel while you're sharing their experience and the feedback you get. So
yeah, thanks for sharing that. And previously we talked about that. When it comes to, we talk a lot of things like design thinking, visualization, a lot of things other people data scientists might perceive as non-technical, so they kind of overlook those aspects. So what are your thoughts on those?
Yes, that's something we were even then talking about, how, when we talk about team development, career, design thinking, visualization are considered as soft topics.
Yeah.
And I mean, yes, it's not core, algorithmic development, but they're very important as well. They're part of the process.
Yeah.
And ultimately, if you don't balance them well, your model might not be implemented, right?
Yeah.
If you don't have that, either the mindset or, as I mentioned, understanding the user-centric approach, years or months of work might be wasted.
Yeah.
I always keep telling my team how data visualization can be like at the end stage of a whole project, of a whole model. So I always tell them we're translating a lot of work that was done by somebody else or by our team.
Yeah.
So we have to make sure that work and effort does not get lost in translation. And ultimately we can either make it succeed or make it fail, because we're building that platform of the insight and the model and the performance, and collecting the feedback for the end user.
Yeah.
So don't see it as a soft topic. It's just another topic, another tool of your tool set that you need to master or be aware of. If you're not a master in that, if you're not interested, be aware that you need it to make your project or your product succeed, and diversify, diversify, look for help or just be aware of that.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. How I see it is like you have very advanced model. You focus on the, hardcore skills. It's like you're building a chip for a computer, but this chip has to be able to communicate with other, buttons and equipment, other chips in the computer. So you have to have this soft skills to help you route to other elements, to collaborate with your team, your engineers, your product managers. So the very sophisticated chip you build can actually be put in use. So you need to have your chip built, but don't forget to route it somewhere connected to other part of the bigger equipment, so you can actually drive impact, not just for your company, and also build your own career.
That is true. And also it's a gateway to learning more. Like if you're curious, okay, I want to build this model, geospatial model, whatever, but why? And then again, it might be a little bit more the PM hat. Yeah. But it's always helpful. You want to know where you learning, where you implementing that was ultimately going to be done with that project.
Right.
So.
Yeah. The time when you deliver the model is not the end of your project. It's not the end of the learning. And even if your work doesn't really get evaluated after the point, it's always good to measure that or ask the product management or software engineering team, hey, how does that perform? What's the impact it drives, right? Because collecting that data point, it help you to improve your model maybe in the future. And also for your annual review, you need a data point to know what type of impact you drove.
That is true. But yes, I mean, at the very end, every team has their own dynamic. Every team has their own setup that is different. Some data science teams are very similar, the profiles. Some other more different. Some are working on new solutions. Some are working on optimizing and pricing models or things like that, where you might not have to be aware of your end user or understand why you're optimizing the price. But it depends on the nature of your work. But definitely if you're working in data products, in innovation, thinking of starting your new company, thinking of becoming a consultant, thinking of looking for a new job opportunity, they will ask you, what did you do? And then why? So always have the overall perspective with the design thinking behind that, the project perspective, the communication will help you to explain your portfolio, explain your capabilities, collaborate with other people, to get that product done if you're in a product team, or create that innovation if you're in an innovation team. So
and now with more and more tools to enable us to do project management, data visualization, VR, AR, what do you think about the future of data products?
The future of data products. So we're already almost in an immersive world of data products, because we're tracking pretty much a lot of things are being tracked. The future of data products, that's a great question. I hope to see more of explainable data science, less black box things in terms of development. I hope to see more user research connection, more UX, and I know that already this is like the near future. I'm looking forward to new use cases, to new data structures, to new data sources that we might not have now. And I keep seeing an opportunity in feedback loops. How can we embed them more so their intelligence is not just one cycle of development, but an iterative, almost development process where we have to recalibrate less and less the models by ourselves. And I want to see more diversity in data products. I know that you asked in terms of what is the trend. I can go into in geospatial, what it's being done, and new use cases, I don't know, in terms of innovation, or payments now with blockchain. That's very interesting as well. Quantum computing, that's very interesting as well, how it's going to have an impact. So there's a lot in the near future, and I'm happy that there's always still something that we're looking forward to. I don't know what you think in terms of Amazon. I want to see more diversity also in the market.
I think when I think about data products, I think we have more and more like wearables, right? You can track.
I was just thinking about that too. Yes,
I can think about your health, but I think for data scientists, I think those companies building those hardware is actually not easy for you to get like very granular data. It's kind of hard for you to play around. I think I would hope there would be, I understand it. They don't want people to kind of abuse those type of data. They don't want you to analyze your own data and make some wrong decisions. So maybe there could be some criteria. Hey, if you're a data scientist or have some experiences, you can have some access of your own data and analyze it, play with it, I think it would be more interesting.
That's very nice. Like you mean within the company? It's very nice. But yes, we do need, I know there's a lot of, again, projects that are being done, researchers going to algorithmic bias and papers and conferences. I hope to see more of that, more regulation, centralized and clear regulation, whereas away, me as a data scientist, I don't have to be responsible for the privacy, for the results, for the how ethic it is, how explainable it is.
Right.
But then also to see more in terms of the workspace, right? I think that we got so much flexibility now. What are we going to do with it? How are we going to use these development processes that we talked about? How are we interacting with other data scientists? How can we break down the term data scientist? Because there's so many different fields. But overall, I think we're in a good trend. I mean, we're talking more and more, about diversity, not only in terms of gender, but also profile-wise, age, nationalities, language, perspective, culture, what you said. It's always enriching if you want to remain objective and unbiased when you're giving someone pieces of information so that they take their decision or you're making the decision for them. So that's aside of all the amazing use cases of the wearables and, self-driving cars is very cool too, of course. There's so much in quantum computing. I wish you could have like a show on that. Like how it's going to have an impact, because it's a whole different computing paradigm.
If you have any guest suggestions, I'd love to talk to them. So before we wrap up, what is something exciting in your life or career this year?
This year has been very exciting because I'm building a team, and I'm so like recruiting, and I'm doing more strategic work, which is great. And we're doing dynamic dashboards. I'm learning more D3. I always wanted to get into D3. And then we're revamping Our Ladies in Miami. So that's also very exciting. It's coming this year, the remaining of this year. And I've seen Miami grow and flourish, and I mean the data science community in Miami has grown because so many people have been moving to Miami. There's a lot of companies as well moving here. Blackstone, Microsoft, they're all opening offices here. So that's very exciting. Face-to-face conferences are coming back. So that's also very exciting.
Thanks for sharing that.
I hope that you come more often to Miami, Daliana.
I'll come back and look forward to more conversation like this. And I learned a lot from your journey. And also, I know this is your birthday weekend. So happy birthday.
Thank you. Thank you.
And for folks who want to follow your journey and learn more from you, where can they find you online?
Absolutely. You can find me in LinkedIn, Laura Gabrysiak, and also on social media. And Our Ladies Miami, just look it up and Meetup. Our Ladies Miami. It's a meetup.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that.
All right. Well, thank you, Daliana, for being here, and thank you for this opportunity. And it's a pleasure to meet you guys. If you have any feedback, questions, just post it on the comments or reach out to us. And until the next time.
Until the next time. Bye.
Bye.